Good morning, everybody. We're going to give everybody 2 minutes to join, and then we'll begin the webinar for Model Use Storage Maintenance Plan. Thank you, guys. Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Sarah McEwen. I am working with the Watershed Initiative. We're going to go ahead and get started, and we will kick things off now. So Ahmad, if you're ready. The purpose of today's call is to discuss the Model Use Storage and Maintenance Plan. Today's webinar will include this agenda. To begin, we will start with just a modeling program summary. Then we will go into the purpose of this webinar and how you can submit your public comments and questions. We'll discuss briefly the reference documents that went into and support the museum plan. Then we will also discuss the museum plan and the outreach that was done, the museum plan alternatives comparison. Then we'll open it up to any comments and questions, and finally close with summary and next steps. So a little bit of housekeeping. We have an hour and a half reserved after the presentation for comments and questions. Participants can also submit these comments and questions during the presentation using the chat feature. We're going to ask the participants to use the raise hand feature, and we will unmute each speaker to then submit their comment verbally. We will try to go in the order of the hand raise feature. Please lower your hand after, and if time allows after all the speaking comments, then we will go to the written comments and questions. We'd like to keep it to 5 minutes max just to make sure everyone can be heard. And we will record this meeting, of course, but all comments and questions posed verbally and in the chat will be transcribed and published in the official record of public comment. So just to get us going, we're going to discuss the model program summary. So a little bit about the model program. The two goals are to build and sustain. With build, we want to collect accurate, timely, and consistent data to develop the high-quality hydrologic and hydraulic models statewide to support the evaluation of flood mitigation plans, policies, and projects. In addition, we want it to be sustainable. So we want to ensure that our program outcomes and tools continue to support flood risk reduction efforts throughout the state long after the CDBG MIT funds are expended. And for any more information on previously released documents, information about the program, please visit watershedla.gov. So here first to kind of go over each of the teams. This is our technical design and quality team. It's a small core group providing the technical services to support the data and modeling program outcome. It includes DOTD, CPRA, OCD, ULL, the Water Institute of the Gulf, and Tulane University. In addition, we have many individuals and groups that are supporting us through the Data and Modeling Technical Advisor Group. They support the transparency, predictability, and quality assurance and control in developing and finalizing the modeling and the data deliverables for the state. And as you can see, we have a very diverse group of government, education, research, and design individuals that are supporting that D&M advisory group. Specific to the model development, we have 7 model consultant teams. These are private engineering firms that were selected in a competitive process that will be developing the 47 HUC 8 H&H models statewide. And they're listed there. So now, what is the purpose of this webinar and how can you submit your input? A little bit of background. On August 5th, the Council on Watershed Management approved a 60-day public comment period for this museum plan. And the purpose of this webinar is to discuss the objectives of the museum plan and encourage public comment. So why is this public comment being requested? We want to ensure transparency in the overall program. There are long-term costs estimated in the draft plan and partnerships that would be required to maintain the system. We want to ensure that there's a capacity that's being built. One of the next steps in the program is training the user groups. There's a public education component. The public should be prepared to access and understand the modeling outputs as they are developed and processed. To also increase the trust and credibility, we want to incorporate public input on the model management approaches before building this IT infrastructure to ensure that everyone's thoughts and opinions are heard on that manner. So some questions we'd really like to prompt you to consider as you review or have reviewed the model use storage and maintenance plan while you're submitting your public comments. After you've reviewed the plan, are there any specific concerns with the preferred plans? Is there any support or training that, if provided, would lead to choosing another path? Are there any general comments on the document? Are there pros and cons that need to be included? If a preferred approach is identified, please provide justification. That really helps inform the recommendation going forward. So the overall process, August 26th through October 25th is the 60-day public comment period. A notice was distributed by email, and you can always, as always, stay connected with watershed.la.gov. Today we are having the webinar. In addition, regional steering committees will provide updates on the public comment period. It can be a vessel for submitting those public comments. The webinars and how to submit comments they can provide their webinars and how to submit comments during their meetings. And if requested, the state will provide a full presentation on the museum plan at those RSD meetings. So what is the result of this public comment period? The state will organize, address, and incorporate the public comments into the draft museum plan. The working group will review the updated draft and develop recommendations for the council's considerations. The final plan and recommendations will be presented to the council before the end of the year. And then the implementation of phase 2, the prototype development would begin in 2022. So how do you submit the public comment? So to access the draft plan and submit comments online, please visit the modeling program webpage at watershed.la.gov. Comments can also be submitted by email, mail, or fax as listed below. If you need any special assistance, please email watershed@la.gov. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ahmad.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Imad Habib. I'm a professor with the Civil Engineering Department at University of Louisiana Lafayette. I serve on the technical design and quality team supporting the LWI on different aspects of the modeling and data program. Before we talk about the museum report and plan, I would like to share some notes on some supporting documents that were also distributed along with the museum plan. And the main document, or one main document here, is the guidance on modeling methodology. And the guidance basically emphasizes the intended use of the models, and also it communicates the purposes and approach that the modeling consultants should follow while developing the LWI regional models. So the guidance will ensure to have consistency among the models developed by the 7 modeling regions. we want to ensure that the models are designed with the proper attributes to meet the objectives of the models. We also want to leave and provide latitude to harness the innovation and skills of the modeling consultants. The guidance is also helping to inform the scope development and expectations regarding the desired model features and quality control from the modeling consultants. The guidance actually has gone through several versions that started in November of 2020, and the latest version that's available online now was released in March of 2021. Besides the main document itself, it has several appendices and technical memorandums. Some of them are already released as appendices, and some of them are still in the work. And I'm going to talk about some of those in a minute here also. The guidance emphasizes the intended use of the regional LWI models and sets the expectations on what the stakeholders can use the models for. Primarily, the models are intended for regional applications. Examples of such applications include larger regional scale project evaluation, such as river diversions, levee systems, large-scale detention ponds, interstate or state highway crossings over major rivers, large-scale developments along major river floodplains. The models also can be used for assessments of changes due to filling of the floodplain in terms of channel and floodplain conveyance. Another important appendix that you will find in the guidance is deals with naming conventions of the LWI model attributes. The purpose of this appendix or this methodology for naming is that naming of model components must be unique and systematic. We want to avoid duplicate names and instances of streams that have arbitrary names or no names at all. So we followed best practices and adapted a naming convention system that was developed in Harris County for their own models. We further developed and enhanced that system to suit the level, the LWI models and their level of complexity. As a result of that system, each stream and model element will have a unique numerical name. To enhance readability, a database will be developed to map those names to common local names for the same features that the models will identify. Moving to the main part of the presentation today that talks about the MUSM plan. MUSM stands for Model Use, Storage, and Maintenance Plan. The plan or the report that you will see on the website of the LWI is developed with the main purpose of supporting state decision to identify the most effective strategy to sustain the use, storage, and maintenance of the models by all relevant stakeholders. The study actually leverages stakeholder feedback and also research for existing flood model management systems in other states. And we will elaborate on that more in the next few slides. I want to emphasize that the slides that we're presenting today are basically a high-level overview of the MUSM plan. And for more details, we encourage you to read the full report that was publicly published on the LWI website. The report also has a summary section, a detailed summary section that provides an abbreviated version of the entire report. Basically, the report, and what we'll try to do today also in our presentation, the report evaluates possible management approaches, including fully regional approach, a fully central approach, or variations of these approaches. And the report presents an analysis of these approaches with pros and cons, and it does not recommend a specific approach that will be followed. So it's an analysis that supports the decision making. The report also includes a comprehensive cost analysis of the different approaches. While the cost is only one evaluation criteria, the cost is presented to inform the decision-making process of selecting a certain approach. The report will also outline a phase 2 that is intended to advance the development of the museum system. And phase 2 is designed in such a way that it does not necessarily depend on the selection of a certain approach, whether central or regional or any other variation. The museum plan really is made of two main components. One that deals with maintenance and management of the models, the H&H, the hydrology and the hydraulic models, and another component that deals with IT infrastructure maintenance and management. The H&H model maintenance deals basically with once the models are produced, they will sit in a repository, and there will be a process of model checkout, model use for regional project evaluations, for statewide watershed plans as examples. And then the models will, if they are revised, they will be updated. They will go through a model review and validation and approval before they can be checked back into the repository. So that's the cycle of H&H model maintenance. To support that, there's an infrastructure, there's an IT infrastructure. In very general terms, that simply is a web-based software for model storage, discovery, and access. The software should allow the checkout and the check-in. And of course, the software will need maintenance and security updates. So this is a very high level. Of course, it's much more complicated than that, but that's basically what the functionality of these two components are. And both components can be implemented at the regional level, at statewide or central level, or in a variation of the two, as we will elaborate further in the next slides. Later on in the presentation, my colleague, Dr. Masalhi, will elaborate on the costs associated with these two components and what they really mean in terms of the different approaches. Just to give you an overview of the plan development and where we will be going from this stage, we are currently in a phase 1, which started last year, and basically it resulted in the report that you are currently commenting on. So we are still in the review process of that report, and a final plan, as Sarah indicated earlier, will be produced, and some recommendations will come from the working group that will inform the next phases. Phase 2 of the effort will focus on developing a prototype of what the museum system will look like, and the report advocates that this prototype to be developed with close coordination and interaction, active engagement by stakeholders, beta user group, that represents the different potential and relevant stakeholders of the models. The idea that we want to capture the input of the stakeholders in developing the system itself. And that phase 2 will also produce more detailed information or more accurate information on the costs associated with the deployment and the operation and maintenance, long-term operation and maintenance of the museum system itself, so that that can inform the future phases. The last phase, or phase 3, is basically once you have the prototype developed, you can implement it, you can deploy it, and you can start using the system, and hopefully that will align with the time that the models are fully developed and available to be used for the stakeholders. That phase 3 can include, like I said, deployment of the system, of the museum housing and maintenance system. That will allow the use of the models, will allow the continual operation and maintenance of the models and the infrastructure of the IT, the updates of the H&H models to capture land use changes and developments. And periodically, every 6 to 8 years or so, the system may go through a full upgrade, both from the IT perspectives and the H&H components. This process, as the report outlines, will and should be informed by input and oversight from regional and state agencies. So the report advocates for establishing committees that include regional coalitions and state agencies to provide continuous input and oversight to the development of the museum plan and the long-term use and operation of the models. Just a quick overview of the methodology that we used to develop the plan. The methodology is basically a user-centered design. It follows a user-centered design. So it tried to keep its eyes on the user purposes and the user needs. We started with a stakeholder outreach to gather input from the regions. And my colleague, Dr. Liz Skilton, will elaborate on that in a few minutes. And that was also followed by analysis of existing systems. We wanted to learn from other systems that may exist in other states. So we reviewed a total of 8 existing model management systems in different states. We also conducted some interviews with the administrators of these systems to learn more about the lessons learned. We also talked with the report details, the conversations and the meetings with state agencies that are affiliated with the initiative, and also federal agencies such as the Army Corps and FEMA. And that all resulted in the report that you all have now. And like I said, the report includes, in very high terms, a delineation of the possible approaches with pros and cons, a cost analysis, a high-level system architecture on what the IT could look like, and then a roadmap with phase 2 and phase 3. Just to give you an idea of how the museum system will work, once the models are developed and implemented and available for use, these models will sit in a repository. And the models can be checked out and modified by all stakeholders, including local, regional, and state users. The models will be, any modifications to the models will be reviewed by LWI affiliate entities with knowledge of modeling and local watersheds. Again, this vision here is not necessarily dependent on which approach you follow regarding the model housing and maintenance. It really ensures that no matter which approach you follow, you should support these kind of features. The general public will be able to access the system to basically see where the models are, what's the updates in different regions, and so forth. The scientific community will also be able to offer recommendations and participate, for example, in training, for developing performance measures for the models and what have you. Again, the report, and as you can see in this slide, emphasizes the need for a statewide standards committee composed of federal and state advisory committee that works with the regions to ensure consistency, coordination, and alignment between the different regions. I'll pass the slides to my colleague, Dr. Liz Skilton, professor at UL here, and she's expert in social sciences. She led the component on regional outreach and gathering input from the different regions. So Liz.
Good morning, everyone. The slide you're looking at here reports on the results of the outreach research with the 8 LWI regions. The slide shows quotes from the LWI provisional governance recommendations that were developed by the LWI regions, showing the recommendations that the LWI regions made about the future regional coalition responsibilities toward and governance of model use, storage, and maintenance. We conducted a total of 9 focus groups from October 2020 through January 2021 with pre and post surveys that included about 75 participants from the 8 regions. In general, LWI regions feel very strongly that they have the ability to manage their own modeling activities or to build the capacity needed to do so. Region-based entities possess intricate knowledge of hydrology and hydraulics of their watersheds and streams, as well as knowledge of the institutions in their regions, and feel that they are best positioned to understand the implications of the proposed developments. They also feel that they have the largest stake in ensuring that these models are maintained on an ongoing basis so that the models can be used to manage their own watersheds adequately. For more information about the methodology and results of the regional outreach, please refer to the summary section of the report sections 4 and 5 of the MUSM full report.
Thank you, Liz. Moving along with results that inform the report. So this, like I said, we reviewed and interviewed managers of other systems that do similar functionality. So we reviewed a total of 8 or 9, if I'm not mistaken with the count here, of existing systems and systems that are under development. So those included systems from Texas, from North Carolina, a system that is managed and developed by FEMA, a system also that's actually developed currently by the Army Corps of Engineers, a system from a private entity, Deltaris, from the University of Iowa, and also a system that is currently in development in Texas, which is known as the TDIS system. And this slide here talks about, just shared some few notes about the TDIS system in Texas, Texas Disaster Information System. And as some of you may already know, that Texas is also developing a watershed modeling and data program for their state. And they are building a model repository that they are willing to share lessons learned and share any resources with the LWI program to leverage any ongoing efforts. And LWI program staff will be exploring opportunities to collaborate with the TDIS system in Texas. What we learned from reviewing these systems in the 8 systems that I just showed in the previous slide, we learned that actually none of the existing systems were developed for the only purpose of model development, model management. They include components such as risk communication or just flood mapping and things like that. However, when we talked with the system administrators, they expressed that if they had to start all over, they would develop separate and simpler systems with functionality tailored to specific use cases and users, rather than developing a combined flood risk communication and flood management system. The model managers also wished that they spent more resources making the process of model check-out and check-in more efficient and consistent, and developing consistent processes to support model revisions. So that's something that they acknowledge that is needed, and they look forward to the LWI effort to actually develop these functionalities so that they can also learn from and adopt in their own systems. Another piece of information that we learned from them is on how much it cost them to develop their systems. And the feedback that we got from them, that the cost to develop existing model systems, again, this is not the cost to develop the models themselves, this is the cost to develop the model management system. It ranged from about $600,000 to $1.4 million. We converted these into 2020 dollars. Of course, many of these systems were developed several years ago, so we converted that to current dollars. That cost was basically consumed, or mostly dedicated to the operation and the maintenance costs, staff that's needed to support the museum or the model management in their cases. In general, again, the report provides a lot more details about these other systems. In general, the operation and maintenance costs for their systems were funded via taxes or fees. Again, please visit the full report to read about each one of those systems and overall lessons learned. The report, again, has a summary section. The report is pretty lengthy, but it has a summary section at the beginning. For those of you who cannot read the full report, they can certainly read the summary section, which has a detailed, abbreviated version of the report. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Masalhi with Tulane University. He's also a member with the TDQ team, who will talk to us about a detailed analysis of the different approaches that we analyzed in the museum, including cost as well. Ihab.
Thank you, Imad. Next slide, please. So here we will start to go into a little bit more details about the various approaches that we considered. And again, they are mainly here, we are discussing the two primary components that Imad mentioned a few slides earlier about the H&H modeling, the management and the housing of that component, and as well as the IT component. So these are the two primary components that are handled differently among these approaches that are listed here. First, the centralized approach that is basically states or premised on all the H&H modeling and the IT personnel, they are residing at the state level, for example, within an agency. And the model use updating the models or reviewing changes to the model are governed at the state level with regional collaboration. So that's the centralized approach. The regional approach is basically that all the H&H modeling and the IT personnel will be residing at the regional level, for example, within the regional coalitions or governed by the regional coalitions, as an example. And in this case, the model use and the update and the reviews will be governed at the regional level with input from state and federal stakeholders. Then we looked at blended approaches, and in here we focused on one of the blended approaches where the IT personnel will be residing at the state level, while the H&H modeling personnel will be residing at the regional level. And the regional entities and the state agencies in that case will need to collaborate on governance of the model use on the update and the review activities. There is a fourth approach, which is called federated. In that particular approach, the IT personnel will be residing at the state level, but the H&H modeling personnel and the model governance will be classified based on actually the model use. So in this case, the model governance will be residing at both the regional and the state level, but the governance role will be dictated by the use, like we mentioned. So they will be led by the state and informed by regions if the models are required for state use, for example, regulatory purposes. And it will be led by the regions otherwise. A common feature among all four of these approaches that the state and the regions should share standards through metadata standards and so on to ensure consistency statewide. So that's a common feature among all of the approaches. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Imad, could you please advance the slide?
Imad, can you hear us? Oh. We lost Imad.
Yeah, he lost power. So let me share my screen real quick, and I will take over for him. Please bear with us while we do this. Can you tell me what slide we were on?
No, earlier, please. Earlier. Okay. Go one earlier, please. Okay. So yeah. So go to 34, please. Thank you. Next slide. That's it. Okay. So in this slide here, we will summarize the benefit of each one of the approaches. If you click one time, Sarah, it will highlight the regional option. Can you click? Yes, there you go. So for the regional approach, we will benefit basically from tapping into the regional and the local knowledge and familiarity with the watersheds and the institutions relevant to that watershed. We will benefit from a quick response to local and regional needs, And also it will build on it will be consistent with the capacity building component, which is an important component of the initiative in general. And in terms of the IT being at the regional level, it will benefit from tailoring the IT needs to regional model maintenance needs, and it will avoid single point of failure for the entire state, for example. In the central approach, on the other hand, if you click one more time, Sarah, then we will benefit from some cost saving through a shared central staff to manage the model reviews throughout the regions. It will also benefit from ensuring consistent maintenance of the models at the state level for state agency uses, and it will also ensure consistency throughout the regions. And for the central approach in terms of IT infrastructure, again, it will benefit from sharing staff to manage the IT infrastructures. It will also ensure consistent platform for supporting the model use throughout the state, and it will allow regions to focus mostly on the H&H modeling activities. The blended approach, however, if you click one more time, it's basically the diagonal here. So we will benefit from what we talked about in terms of the H modeling being done at the regional and the benefits of the centralized IT infrastructure. So that's the blended approach will grab or capture these two components in there. Again, a lot more details about each one of the approaches and the pros and cons are listed starting from section 10 in the report. So please, I would encourage you to dig into the report and look for more details in addition to the summary provided here in the slides. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we'll outline the roles and responsibilities for each one of those 4 approaches that we discussed earlier. I would like to start by mentioning that the last 2 columns here, which emphasize a common feature among all of the discussed approaches in the report. One, that all the approaches will have shared commitment to statewide consistency. For example, throughout the state standard advisory committees and state and federal advisory boards will be needed to make sure that things are consistent across all the regions for a long-term usability of the models. Also, all the approaches, regardless of which one, they must ensure that all models are accessible to all LWI affiliated entities. So these are 2 common features among all the approaches. And now we can dig into the specifics of the maintenance of the H models, as well as the maintenance of the IT infrastructure. Central approach, as the name alludes to, it will be done by central entity. The blended approach, it will be done by regional coalition for the H&H, but the central entity for the IT infrastructure. The regional approach is going to be a regional coalition for both the H&H models as well as the IT infrastructure. The federated approach, because it is based on model use, so it's suggesting to have a central entity for regional, central entity and for the LWI models, and regional coalitions responsible for non-LWI. And for the IT, under the federated approach, it will be done by central entity. So again, here, this is a summary delineation of who's going to be responsible for each one of these 2 primary components. Next slide, please. So here we will summarize the resource requirement for and the cost analysis for developing a prototype and a reference model that, again, will be deployed at all the regions or for all the regions. And it should be emphasized that that prototype or reference model will not dictate which option to choose. It will still be, all the options will still be on the table and can utilize that prototype and reference model system that will be developed in phase 2. And then we'll also outline the cost of the deployment and of the running cost after, for basically O&M for the MUSM system. And again, a lot more details about the cost specifically is in section 9 and 10. Next slide, please. So for the future phase that Dr. Habib alluded to earlier in the presentation, basically we are, the report suggests developing a prototype. And we should say that this is gonna It's not going to start from scratch. Actually, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers have an open source model library system that address many, may not be all, but many of the LWI needs. That library, it does have an integration of HMS and RAS models in a cloud-based repository. And again, it will not be requiring or dictating which approach to use. It's still going to be at the general level. It will be a good phase to include also a beta testing group, which that beta group will include membership from all 8 regions, as well as state agents, representatives and federal agent representatives to actually do early testing and input into the attributes and the features of that prototype and reference model that will be developed. The estimated cost for that is, as you can see on the screen, is just shy of $800,000, and it should be done within 12-month period. So that's the development component. Next slide, please. And now we will move into the O&M, the running cost, basically on an annual basis. And for that costing, we consider 2 possibilities. One is that members of the LWI, either regional coalitions or state agencies for the centralized approaches, will be doing the actual work. So we used assumptions on, or the cost estimate based on a typical salaries. And then also we consider if they could contract the work out to consultants hired or managed by either the region or the central entities. So we also included that option. All the assumptions we made about the rates that we use are all included in the report. Obviously, all that can be refined and tightened up, but at least you will see the assumptions that were used. And then we made basically what are the main functionality, the model use, which will be done mostly by H&H modelers, the storage and the cloud infrastructure, that's obviously IT functionality. It will be done by IT personnel, and then the continuous upgrades and maintenance that will be done by a combined effort by H&H modelers, software maintenance consultants, as well as IT personnel. So these are the ingredients that we use to develop these costs. And again, all the assumptions are listed in the report. I encourage you to dive into it and look into it. And if you have questions, please submit them as part of your public comments. Next slide, please. So this is a summary. All the details actually by region are included in the report because it's not all the regions are the same. But on average here, you can get to see that for a staffing option to be done by the actual personnel from the regional or the central entity agencies. For the central approach, it will cost about $2.8 million a year. That's for all 8 regions. So it's roughly about $350,000 per region if we assume they are uniform, and they are not uniform, but the average will be about $350,000 a year. The blended approach is a little bit more, 3.2 million, which is roughly about $400,000 a year per region. And then the regional approach is 3.4, which is a little bit more, 406 to be exact, average per region. If the entities, whether at the regional level or at the central level, decide to contract the work out to consultants, then these are the rates using, again, assumed fully burdened rates of an average consultant in the state. I should mention that for all the approaches, the H&H modeler, you can, as part of that cost, about 80% of that cost was for H&H modeler, because that's the heavy lifting to keep up the models, review, manage the check in and check out, make sure that the updates were done properly and so on. So 80% of the effort or of that cost is actually H&H models. The IT activities contributed about 15% of that cost. Actually, the storage was a pretty small component, and other administrative fees that rounded up the total cost. The very first year will be slightly higher than the remaining running years, anywhere between 1 to 9% higher in the first year, and then afterward, the cost will be flat for keeping up the system. Next slide, please. So this is the last slide, which emphasizes again the capacity building needs. Obviously, for the regions to be able to interact and manage these systems, there is a capacity building component, which is an important component of the initiative in general. And to be specific here, what we mean by capacity building, specifically as relevant to this component of the program, we're talking about hardware, basically building capacity for in-house as well as cloud-based computing infrastructure. We're talking about building capacity for technical personnel, IT, GIS, and H&H support. And again, an important component talks about the training and the education. So basically training on H&H use and applications, training on effective stormwater management techniques. There is an upcoming webinar, for example, about using nature-based solutions for improved floodplain management activities and techniques. We're talking also about training to help stakeholders understand how to interact with and upkeep of the museum system. So there's a lot of training activities that will help with the capacity building. So these are summary activities in there. There is a section in the report that also talks about. Next slide. And I believe that that's my last slide. Thank you.
Thank you. And at this time, we will open it up to any comments and questions. So again, per our procedure, we're going to ask you if you would like to participate verbally to please raise your hand, and we will unmute you in the order in which you raise your hand so you can speak and submit your comment. And again, this is being recorded, and all public comments will be transcribed and issued into public record. And additionally, if you do not feel comfortable verbally speaking, you can submit it in the chat. Once we've completed the verbal speaking component, we will look to the written comments and questions. And we'd ideally keep this to 5 minutes max per person in the interest of time. So with that, we will open it up. If anybody has any comments or questions, please raise your hand.
Hi Sarah, we had one hand raised and it looks like it's been lowered, but I'm not seeing any hands raised right now, but we've got one raised now. I'm going to Dennis Lambert. I'm going to allow you to talk now.
Hey everybody, this is Dennis, and I put my comments in the Q&A, and I just want everyone to understand that the H&H models that are supporting BCAs under the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, that this work that you're doing would be valuable for that program, because H&H drives, you want to look at pre and post mitigation water surface elevations. And if you have a big drainage project, for example, say you have 1,000 properties, you're going to look at how you lower the water surface elevation at each one of those properties. And that then is put into what we call a loss avoidance spreadsheet. And as a result of that computation, it's a pretty tedious entry, but it really starts with the model. And once those calculations are made in lowering the damages, that's then entered into the FEMA BCA toolkit. And then that calculates your benefit cost ratio. And you have to have at least a 1 to get funded. So anyway, these grants have a period of performance. And I think these models, once they're up, they will help applicants meet those periods of performance. Usually it's 3 years. They do extend them, but it would just be wonderful to see y'all get these things up and running to help at least the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. That was my comment. And I don't know if you've ever done a session on BCAs, but it might be useful for LWI to do a session on that, so that everybody understands how it would be used. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. And model use is something very important to the program and actively being investigated. I would invite any of our other panelists to provide feedback on that comment as well.
Sarah, this is Ehab. Yes, thank you, Dennis, for the comment. I think these are important topics, and perhaps they can be also included in part of the discussions and the training that we just listed in the very last slide. I think it is an important component. Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, just to add on to Dennis's comment as it relates to the BCA, today's presentation is about H&H models, but for the broader group's awareness, as part of the program, there's also development of some of the economic or consequence models that go into the BCA that Dennis mentioned. So that isn't a part of today's presentation, but for everyone's situational awareness, things like structure inventories and the aspects used in that BCA are being compiled as part of the program. Information on that will probably be shared at another time, but just want to make sure that everyone realizes that is a component of the program as well.
Thank you, Hugh and Ehab. Do we have any other hands raised, or if not, we'll give it another minute or two and switch to any submitted comments and questions. We'd ask that if you've put it in the chat, please submit it formally as a question so we can make sure we've captured it.
Hi, Sarah. We've got 2 hands raised. Dietmar, I'm gonna allow you to talk now. Dietmar, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Oh, okay, thank you. Look, one of the issues we have in our discussion in Region 7, and it was in one of the slides, it points in that direction, that on the part of many people that we're dealing with on this modeling, it's a complex issue. In other words, it's easy for the experts, and it makes a lot of sense. But one of the issues is, in my opinion, is there's a little bit of misconception of what the models are and what the models are not. Regional models I'm talking about. And really, I have been bringing up this, many people think that these models are going to be able to have the sensitivity to determine what might be the impact of a relatively small project in a basin, for example. They have the idea that anything that they might think of, any local government is going to tell us or give us a quantitative number that tells us what that might, or the impact of that might or might not be. Is there any way perhaps this could be explained to the general public more, or to the people, really what the regional modeling, the sensitivity I'm talking about of the regional models are? Like I said, in one of the slides I saw, it mentions large projects, and I just, if somebody can make a comment about that, I think that would help.
Yeah, I think we included that slide for this very same purpose that you mentioned, and we emphasize the regional scope of the models and their intended applications. So we agree with you, and I think the program will soon initiate some more discussions and more meetings about the model use and what the different stakeholders in the regions should expect to use the model for in a meaningful way. Sarah, please feel free to elaborate on that as far as the upcoming discussions of the model use.
So I would invite Stoka, if you're on, if you would like to add anything as far as speaking to maybe those regional 2-pagers that we're anticipating and other items to support the model
Yeah.
use and capacity.
Sure, absolutely. So, yeah, for that very purpose, DMOR, as Dr. Habib mentioned, we are currently taking the proposed approved model designs for each of the regions and putting together a 2-page document that's going to be for the different areas to understand the level of detail for different areas in the region, and as well as trying to put some information on what type of projects can and should be used to be evaluated for those different model types. So soon to be coming.
Thank you, Stoka. And it is a very important discussion, and we appreciate that comment. The scale and use and understanding of the models as they're currently being developed, as well as future use and capacity, is an ongoing effort and will be presented and hopefully future communications as well.
Righty. Next, we have Chuck Berger.
Yeah, I guess 2 things is, number one, just to remind people, as far as my understanding is with the models, these are base models. And so don't want people to misunderstand it, think that these models will give all the answers right away. These are intended to be base models. And it will be up to, some other entity to use the models to update them for a particular situation or project. And if that has changed, please somebody correct me. But the other thing I wanted to say is that there are a lot of sort of side or spinoff efforts associated with this program. And one of them that I'm aware of is about to get started is a grant work to evaluate to work on BCA tools for natural functions to better evaluate those. So that is something that is getting started in the coming weeks. So.
Thank you, Chuck. That's a great reminder.
All right, next we have Kayla Sage. Okay, you are unmuted. There we are.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone for their participation. I didn't have a direct comment other than I would encourage everyone to please review and submit their comments. We'll be glad to hear from everyone.
Great.
Thank you, Kay. And as a reminder to what Sam Martin had mentioned in the chat, if you'd like to formally submit a question that we can respond to, please put it in the question and answer box rather than just the chat. Both will be transcribed, but it'll be easier for us right now to respond to those that are officially submitted in the Q&A.
We have no other hands raised. I think it's time we direct our attention to the, oh, no, we have one hand. Oh no, Tom lowered his hand. Okay, I think it's time that we move over to the question and comments that have been inserted into the Zoom chat. First, we have from Rachel Sanderson, LWI Region 7's updated provisional recommendation that was provided to OCD following the June 29th, 2021 RSC meeting states the following with regards to data and modeling. Repository of technical data and information, including H&H models at the state level that is informed by and made accessible to the region. Examples may include statewide data portal website, technical assistance for interpretation and utilization of information and data. Examples may include support for interpretation and use of H&H model information and other data, translation of models into action for projects, policy, and programs, provide information and have technical expert run models and provide outputs, partnership opportunities for a regional gauge network, and governance recommendation. The governance recommendation can be viewed here, and she includes a link. Next.
So do we respond to those, Ben?
Oh yeah, yes, or expand upon her statement.
So thank you, Rachel. We will update.
Ben, I think that was just a comment.
Okay, but if Emad wants to expand, add anything to it, feel free to do so.
No, I'm fine. So thank you for the comment, and we'll definitely take into account in the revised version.
Great. Next, we have Gregory Ellison with a question. Can you speak to the next steps after modeling is complete, i.e. developing the regional capacity to recommend projects to mitigate risks of regional flooding?
Is that in the chat box or in the Q&A?
That's in the Q&A, but we're getting questions and chats in both. So I'm just kind of reading through them as they come in.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'll maybe comment on this. As we outlined in the presentation and also in the report, there is a next phase, which is development of a prototype on how the models can be housed and maintained in a repository. And then once the models are complete, the models will be put in the repository, and the system will allow the different users to access them for their own potential use scenarios. That's the vision, from there. We envision that phase 2 can take up to a year, and then the models themselves will be completed in about less than 30 months. So by then, the repository and the model use and management system should be up and running, and the models should be available for access and use by stakeholders through the MUSM platform. Does that answer your question, Greg?
Dietmar has his hand raised. Let's Dietmar has to say. Dietmar, you're gonna have to unmute yourself. Dietmar, you're gonna have to unmute yourself. Can you, if you can hear me?
Sorry, guys, I keep forgetting that little click I have to do every time. No, the point I want to make is I noticed that in one of the slides when we're talking about operation maintenance, how is it going to be paid for? And it mentions fees, taxes, and so on and so forth, and some other reasons, but primarily that. And what I'm saying is that is a heavy lift. Even to get the taxes for a project, it is a very, very iffy situation. I only imagine in the mind of the general public, I'm just thinking in those terms, to really try to pass a tax on something like that when the need to resolve problems or to minimize flood losses are so great. And so the point I'm trying to make is I think that we need to, or you need to, consider maybe the other alternative for funding more on the state side, even if it is temporary, to kind of start the process, so to speak. Because if we are going to just depend on that, I believe that there might be other regions are going to be okay, but in our region, I say that will not fly at all. And so the only comment I'm making, let's not put all of our eggs into that. if you can, and really look at alternatives, even if it is a temporary, maybe it's like starting an engine, or an engine that never run, give it that extra, that extra push, so to speak, to get it started. If we can get it started and demonstrate to the public the benefits of that, then you have a better chance, perhaps, to seek a fee or a tax or anything of that nature. That's my comment.
I can follow up with, appreciate the comment. Just a clarification that the slide that referenced to fees and taxes, this was talking about how the other systems in the other states are doing it. This report or the museum plan did not cover the issue of where the funding will come from. Not that it's not important, but the report was not tasked by that aspect. And I know the program is looking, and I think there was a release of a report some time ago about possible sources of funding that the program can consider for supporting the overall modeling and data efforts. But this was not part of this current report.
All right, next we have a comment from Dietmar that in Region 7, the Amite River Basin Commission be included as a potential agency to keep up the model. Next we have from Dennis Lambert. I'm a cost benefit analyst for IEM under contract with Sept to perform BCAs for the Hazard Mitigation Grants Program. I would like to share that H&H models are the drivers for many BCAs. The pre and post mitigation WSEs are used to calculate the pre and post damages in the loss avoidance spreadsheets that the results are then entered into the FEMA BCA toolkit. I believe LWI needs to have a session on this one use of H&H models in order to understand the period of performance for grants and the value of these models will have in meeting the FEMA requirements for HMGP. I suggest reaching out to either Sean Wyatt or Jeffrey Gearing to do this session on BCAs. Sean is the Deputy Director of Hazard Mitigation at GOSEP. Jeffrey is the State Hazard Mitigation Officer for GOSEP. Next we have Jeff Dudrick. Are these models intended to be used for regulatory compliance in the future? For example, flood insurance map updates and statewide floodplain regulation.
That's actually looked upon. If you read in the model guidance report, which is a reference document that was also published with the museum plan, you will see a set of near-term objectives or primary goals that the models will support, and also future goals or added value goals that the project will support. And I believe the applications that you referred to are listed there as a potential future goals that the models will support.
Alrighty, next we have a question from Heather Urena. Have you included the national dashboard within the mapping foundations?
If you can include a link or a specific document about it, we'll be happy to look into it.
Great. Next, we have a comment from Megan Reisinger. I would like to comment that the City of Monroe and the future water campus in Region 3 be included as a potential agency to upkeep the modeling and data. Next, we have a comment from Melissa Kennedy. If regions are going to be responsible for managing the models, where's the check to ensure the standards are followed for consistency?
I'll comment on this, and the other panelists, please feel free to add. That question actually applies to all approaches, whether the regions or the state or any other approach, that the plan emphasizes that there should be a mechanism for ensuring standards, no matter which approach is taken. And one way to do that is to establish a committee that involves the regions and the state agencies to ensure that these standards are followed and in place.
Alrighty. Next, we have a question from Dennis Lambert. One more question. Shortly after the 2016 floods under the disaster number 4277, there were efforts to delineate the extents of flooding in GIS for East Baton Rouge Parish, Livingston Parish, etc. These layers are in the public domain. My understanding is a model was quickly constructed to simulate the 2016 event as well, which might have depth grid. This would be useful to some BCAs still being worked on. I believe this was done by the Water Institute, though I cannot remember. Was there a 2016 model? And if so, is the depth grid available, not just the shapefile with the extents of the flooding?
Hey, this is Brett McMahon with the Water Institute. Hugh, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't recall that would have been us who did that, but Dennis, we can confirm that and get back to you directly. I'm not sure if any others on the call would be more familiar with that.
I wonder if he's referring to the Dewberry analysis that DOTD did.
Yeah, that's what I'm suspecting as well.
For the Amite Basin. And that's essentially a pilot for the models that we're doing across the entire state. So, if that's helpful.
Great. Next, we have a comment from Kay King. I would like to see more about understanding the use of the model.
Thank you, Kay. And I think we've touched on it previously. If we haven't addressed your question to date, please let us know and we'll elaborate. But as Stoka and Ahmad both mentioned, the model use and case and scale at the regional level is being prepared in a couple of different fashions to be more released in a more digestible form to the regional groups. But that is an ongoing discussion and planning effort to outline those uses and capacities as the region and the state.
Alrighty, next we have from Tom Melmay. I agree with Dennis Lambert. Please engage GoSep on the BCA requirements. This is a key component of how locals access funding to reduce flooding. And thank you for the presentation.
And I don't know if it was mentioned before, but Jeffrey Gehring is on the working group of the Watershed Initiative and is aware of all of these efforts, and FYI.
Alrighty, next we have a comment from Ellis Booth. I would like to view the modeling information for regions 1, 2, and 3. Almost all of the drainage systems in these regions come to Caladohula Parish, and the area is also affected by the Mississippi River flood events.
Thank you, Ellis. I'll let Ahmad or Stoka jump in, but I would believe that those regional 2-pagers might be the first source of information that would be most helpful for what you're looking to evaluate, but I'll let Ahmad or Soka provide additional information.
Yeah, I think that's probably the soonest information that will be available on it, and I think it will provide some answers to the question.
Yeah, just to add a little bit more information, these 2 pages will, you will begin to understand exactly where models will be developed and the resolution and type of model in that specific area. So as these things come out, you'll get more information on that.
Alrighty, we have a question from Dan Todd. Earlier in the presentation, you mentioned stakeholders. Can you define stakeholders with examples?
I think, again, this is explained in the report, but I'll provide a brief answer here. So we define stakeholders as any potential users who could benefit from the LWI models. So these could be private entities, private engineers, private sector, could be public sector, starting from the municipalities, the cities, the parishes, the state agencies. And it also includes possible use of the models by federal agencies. So, and I think the program itself defines, who the program will support in terms of the users, but these are the stakeholders that we considered in our analysis.
All right, next we have a comment from Dietmar in regard to an earlier question about a regional inundation map for the Amite River Basin. We are working on this. We should have map finished shortly. All right, that appears to be the last question. No one has their hands raised, and there are no, we have 2 statements. First from Dennis Lambert, Jeffrey Gearing is actively on duty with the National Guard and has been called to serve the response for Hurricane Ida. And most of the year through this year, he was called to serve for Hurricanes Laura, Delta, and Zeta. Just want everyone to know what he has been tied up with. Next, we have a comment from Karen Cupid. I think it should be recognized that as the regions are finding out more information regarding the models, that they may change their view regarding the use, storage, and maintenance from what it was when they were first asked.
Thank you, Karen. And I would just elaborate that that's exactly why this meeting is happening. We wanted to provide that additional information on the museum plan and everything that's gone into informing it. So we hope everyone gets a chance to read through the plan and really thoughtfully reply with their recommendations and comments. And as we had in the previous kind of beginning slide, some of the prompting questions we'd like to be considered, and some reasons to support why, so we can understand.
All righty, we have a question from Heather Urena. Have you included the national dashboard? Oh, no, She removed the question. Alrighty.
Ben, I answered that question. It was the same that we got before, and the answer was share the link with the study team so that they can
Got it.
consider
Yes.
it.
Seeing that now. Seeing that now. Great. Okay. Looks like we don't have any new questions or hands raised. So I think we are all set.
Thank you, Ben. I'll move into kind of next steps and path forward. So again, we're just going to quickly kind of go through the summary and next steps. So a recap and museum plan summary. This document was informed by stakeholders, local, regional, state, federal partners, and existing systems. It analyzes possible approaches, including pros and cons, and cost assessments, roles and responsibilities. It overall will ensure that the access by all stakeholders and coordination is had between the regional and state and federal partners. It proposes some different system architecture types and plans that is applicable to all approaches, whether it's regional, central, or blended, and it delineates the next steps to develop a system prototype not dependent on the final approach. So next steps, and kind of recapping what has been done on a schedule basis. On October 26th, the draft museum plan was posted to the Statewide Modeling Program webpage, including the supporting documents, the guidance on modeling methodology, and different addenda. And as witnessed by the questions today, I would really encourage people to read these supplemental documents that really support and help break down the content within the museum plan itself. Today, we're hosting this webinar, and we'll have all of these comments as well as the recording available and submitted through the public comment process. The public comment period will be 60 days. It started August 26th and will end October 25th. There's various ways to submit your comments, both today through your comment period, but also going forward, should you finish reading the plan or have additional thoughts or maybe some considerations and recommendations you'd like to submit, please email ocd@la.gov or watershed@la.gov. The regional steering committee motions may be submitted via email. You can submit online directly through the Statewide Modeling Program webpage at watershed.la.gov. There's a button and a form. It's really easy to do. We'd encourage you to go through that method as well. You can also mail in your comment to the Office of Community Development at the address listed below, attention to Janice Lovett. You can fax again to the number listed on the screen, attention Janice Lovett. And all comment cards at any in-person RSC meeting could be a vehicle to submit your comment. Overall, the schedule would be the fall of 2021, a final version of this museum plan part 1 that would incorporate these public comments and be informed in the recommendation, would then be submitted to the working group for them to take back to their agencies and be informed by the overall public comment period and recommendation, and provide that recommendation to the council for decision making. So we appreciate your time today. And that we just really thank you for being a participant in this webinar. We hope that the museum plan and these supplemental documents are something that informs you more on the process. And as the program goes forward, I know we're looking to have some additional resources to outline those model use and capacities at the regional level and just continue to be very transparent on the plan going forward. So thank everyone for your attendance today.